Most guys find an oil can and either blast it with a torch or bury it in filler. That's how you turn a savable panel into a scrap panel. In today's video, we're going to show you how to save your panel. The first thing you need to do to address the panel that you have that's damaged is get it stripped clean. You can't have any body filler, no undercoating, no seam sealer anywhere on the hood. What we're dealing with today is a 1947 Cadillac hood, and on this particular hood, it's original paint with a whole lot of surface rust. As we were stripping the hood, we started discovering some dents and some areas that are stretched. And so what we want to do today is just show you guys how to very quickly identify accurately as to where you have the problem, but also understand that what little bit of problems that we do have where it is stretched will cause an oil can. If you have the whole hood only partially stripped and it's a very low crown flat panel like this, it's not very strong, so it's going to be more susceptible to having an oil can versus something that has a lot of shape in it. So it's always best to just strip a larger area than what you're actually showing damage in, just to make sure that you don't have one little dent somewhere holding up everything from actually relaxing back to where it needs to be. What we've already done is gone over this hood with a laser stripper and some 80 grit on a DA just in this general area. And the first thing we're going to be using is Dykem Steel Blue Layout Fluid. What this is going to do is basically act as a guide coat. We're just going to spray a nice thin layer over this area so that way we can come in with a nice next level block. This is an acrylic hard block, and it's going to show us exactly what we're looking for. Once the Dykem dries, we're just going to use anything from 80 grit to 150 grit just so we can see what we're looking for. We're going to be picking a block that goes with the contour of the hood. And very easily we have identified exactly what we have, which is we have one major high point that I have a whole bunch of little hammer marks that you can see where somebody's probably tried to work a dent in the past. And we have another golf ball sized dent over here that we can feel with our whole hand as we run across the panel. So what you want to do is understand that if you have an oil can, you're almost fixed. It's known across the industry that if you have an oil can that it's stretched and that most guys will just jump to a torch and heat shrink it. But what you don't understand is that a torch is not a controllable heat. A lot of times you're putting a lot of heat into something that only needs a little bit of heat. So we're going to show you guys how to accurately pinpoint how much heat and make it right back to where it started from the factory. Understanding the damage that you have on the hood, you need to identify whether it looks like a push dent and an actual stretched area that has a dent. The difference would be if you can think about something that has no strength like this big hood, the fact that you can just push it with your fist in is not, sure it's oil canning and it's stretched, but let's just use another side. You can push the whole side of the hood in, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have dented it. So maybe you pushed it in and the actual molecules of the metal have not been stretched and displaced. We just need to get it back into alignment. So understanding what the shape needs to be, we can use a straight edge or a block and just kind of sight in along the panel to see. This particular hood is very easy because it is so flat and it just has a very slight crown as it kind of curves back. Knowing that, we can visually see that we have this high point, and because we have the strike marks, we know that we have introduced some level of stretch. A push dent would be like if you took your palm and you just popped a dent out and maybe you just have a couple crease lines, that's a push dent. If you actually took a hammer and you wailed or you had something hit the panel and it hit it hard enough that it actually stretched the metal, then there is a requirement for having some heat shrinking. We do not touch heat or a shrinking disc until the shape is understood. Let's elaborate a little bit more between when you may use hammer on dolly or hammer off dolly and or bumping. Bumping is basically just a term where when you have a dolly, now this is a toe dolly, one side is flat, one side has a very low crown. If we have a very low crown panel, we need to match the dolly with the crown. If you have a high crown dolly and you're dealing with something that's very low, you are going to overstretch something very quickly. So it's important to have a variation of shapes that you can then match up with what you have. In this, we have a very high point and we have areas around it that are not necessarily stretched, but they look low. And so what we need to do is basically understand that the shape that we are looking for, we can identify with, in this case, we're going to be using a straight edge or a mellomotive spline. The spline is ideal because they sell these in a variety of lengths and different thicknesses. With you having something that is very flat, we can use this to put it over and bridge to see if the panel is actually the correct shape or is it way out of whack. If you have a panel that's extremely damaged, well then you may want to start with bumping, and that's where you're just going to take the dolly and you're going to have it under the hood and you're just going to be bumping the areas that are low. Those push dents that are slightly in, we need to get everything in alignment with our straight edge. As we identify those areas, now this softball area here that's been pushed in is really kind of more of a push dent. So the few different ways that we can address that is you need to gain access to the backside that you can then bump that back out. In this case, we're going to be using a little bit higher crown of a hammer because what we want to do is we want to tap that up from the bottom side and come back to flat. Knowing that this is such a flat hood, we can use the toe dolly side of it on the outside and we can bump with the hammer, tapping this area that is concaved in and bump it up to where it is getting closer to flat. Because a lot of these tiny little areas that are barely low will cause something to be loose enough that it will just flop around. So what you need to do is use the Dykem to pinpoint where those exact areas are, that how they need to move to come back into alignment with each other. And then the better that you get it, the more that it will start to oil can because it is very loose. It is the most minuscule things that are typically stretched. Now, if you have a panel that has a whole bunch of, let's call it hail damage, and there's a whole bunch of stretch, it's going to be very rigid because you have a ton of damage everywhere that is stretched into the hood. If you think about a big crowned, let's say 40 Ford fender, that has a ton of shape. That's been wheeled or beat in through a shop bag to create all of that stretch and all of that strength. Beads, a lot of shaped panels are going to have all that strength. You're not typically going to see an oil can happen. You're going to see the oil can happen on a panel that's very low crown, very flat. So how we're going to address that is by bumping and then massaging out what is excessively stretched and cold shrinking them into themselves just to get everything back into the alignment. If you have a problem pinpointing exactly where this area is pushed in, you can always flip the panel over, spray Dykem on the opposite side, and it will show you exactly where this high point is as to where you need to strike the hammer to then push it back out into itself. Because we have a toe dolly on this side and we can come underneath, under the bottom and push it upwards, we don't really have a need for getting too crazy and having to create a buck to hold this hood. We're always going to go back to our block and we're going to re-block over the area to see, as the metal comes into shape, what is now touching and becoming in alignment. I also have a very low crown hammer that I can then use to match this up. So if you guys get a profile gauge, this is just a needle gauge, profile gauge off of Amazon, you can put this over the profile of the hood edge, and then what you can do is you can check to make sure that your dolly is the correct shape for what you're going to put underneath. What we're going to do here is we're just basically going to use the hammer and dolly to planish this high point out. You have to get the panel relaxed. So if you have this crown crater around the dent, we need to push this dolly in the center pushing upward, and we're going to massage that crease downward until this is then in alignment. Once that releases the crease, it will allow the metal to relax back into where it needs to go. When we talk about hammer on dolly and hammer off dolly, it may be hard for you guys on camera to listen, but when we are striking right in the right area, we can hear the loud ting as we are hammer on dolly. And anywhere that we hear that loud ting, as long as the dolly has more crown than your hammer and you have pressure going upwards, it is going to raise up. So the area that is low, if you are pushing up in the center, you want to be working from the area that is good into the area that is lower. Do not start to try to work out the center. We want to go around the perimeter, because what that's going to do is you have an area that is stretched. So if we pretend this is like a golf ball dent that's stretched right in the center, and then you come in here, think about it. If it's stretched and you're stretching metal right in the center, then you're doing more damage. It's going to end up being a higher high once you get it to go the other direction. The goal is that you're just relaxing it enough to get it to come out to where it needs to go. If we already know out of the gate whatever hit this is stretched, we know it's stretched. We don't want to overstretch it. We just want to get it from going inward to popping it outward, so that way we can accurately heat shrink this down when we get to it. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to align. We have this high point here, and we can see that it's good metal out here where it's barely touching. So we're going to be bringing the dolly hammer on out here around the perimeter, and as this starts to relax, this whole area will come up nice and easy. And there we've located it, so then we can slide the dolly wherever we need it and then continue on. As you have bumped the dent into alignment and you get it closer and closer, when we can barely feel it, a lot of times that's where I'll jump to the slapper. A slapper, what it's going to be doing is bridging all of the highs, and then you're going to be focusing on putting the dolly in the area on top that is low. That way you're putting pressure and you're smacking down the highs and pushing up in the area that it needs to go in that direction. If you need to know where your dolly is and you can't locate it, you can use the tip of it, and then you can pivot and move. And when it's where you want it to be, then you can come in. Now that we've got this side where it's barely there, we want to check and see, did we make any progress on our oil can? And as this has come up and relaxed this area of the panel, we then need to come in. We have a bunch of hammer marks that are actually going upward, creating this high. And because this is a very flat panel, we are going to be choosing the dolly with the very low crown. And what we're going to do is we're just going to smooth out all of these tiny little highs. And what that should do is allow the panel to be even more relaxed and oil can, to the point where what we want is, we don't want to see all the high points. We want to see a smooth, gradual high point that enters, and then we can jump to heat. So what I did there, and you can see we're stretching, we're hammer on dolly, but we're moving around the area that is high point, trying to make that one smooth crown. And you can feel how much more tension is in it. Again, reiterating that if you have an oil can that is very loose, you are almost fixed, because right here we come in and we add a little bit more stretch, and what that is doing is it's causing an area that is stronger and has more high point. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna continue working down. I already know that this area, as we block this, you can see more areas surfacing up, but I already can feel the damage in a line where there's hammer pick marks going upward. So we're just gonna smooth these so that way we can get a nice curved surface, and then we're gonna jump to a shrinking disc. You need to make sure that you're in the right alignment, because if the shrinking disc is rubbing anywhere on this hood that is not stretched, you're causing more problems that you're going to lock into this hood and fight more, and then it ends up being this huge Rubik's Cube, instead of understanding that a oil can is caused by overstretched metal, and the only way that you are going to get that back perfect is through precision heat shrinking with a shrinking disc. Otherwise, you're always implementing more stretch and you're never going to be going in the right direction. It's just like a sandblasted hood that is overstretched. So anything you do with a hammer and dolly is causing more stretch. You need to think about what damage you see and reverse that. When we're using the shrinking disc, we are using a Makita 6,000 RPM grinder. You do not want to be using a 2,500 to 3,000 RPM buffer. It's not going to create the heat that you need to pinpoint the amount of heat to actually get a good shrink. We're using a 9-inch Ken Sakamoto shrinking disc. This is a serrated disc. It's a very dangerous disc, especially the fact that it is a sharp edge, and it does have a bit of a gyro motion to it. So as you're using this, move slow, move accurately, understand where you're going to be putting this disc. We don't want to be holding the disc on edge, because if we're holding the disc on edge, we are not creating a flat surface. We are shrinking a pinpoint, and that is about as good as using a torch. When you use the shrinking disc, you actually want to be kind of thinking about like using a block. So if you put a shrinking disc on a block, you want an air gap at the tip of the disc as you run over a flat surface. This takes a bit of finesse, and you don't want to be bearing down on the disc. You want to let the weight of the grinder do the majority of the work, and you are just trying to pinpoint where the disc is hitting. You want it to be pinpointing on the high point that you have that is stretched. That way we're reversing the area that is stretched, and we're not affecting any area around it that doesn't need any fixing. The goal here is that you're only trying to shrink the areas that are stretched. We're trying to do this very gradual. We are not trying to cook an area and stay in one spot. You want to have finesse and move only over the areas that are high. I like to give it about a 10-second count before you run over this. That's the way that Ken Sakamoto would teach it. And what that's allowing is the heat to kind of disperse. That way you're not shocking one area immediately. And right out of the gate, this is already feeling better. Now, if we move the grinder over, what you'll notice as we're trying to creep in on these points. This is not a go do it all at the first shot. This is do a little bit, see how it reacted, and if you got the result that you want, then you keep going in that direction. If you have an area that is still bound up, then you have an area that needs a little bit more hammer and dolly to then release that area that has the strength put into it. If it has a big high point, then it may take more shrinking. But a lot of times you want to focus on doing 90% of the work with hammer and dolly before you ever even get to the shrinking disc. As you go, you always want to be using the block to then recheck where the metal is moving as it is tightening up. I still have a lot of high points right through here. I can still feel them. So we're gonna run the disc back through, and then as we have other areas that need to get smoothed out and we start to release that tension, we can come back through that area with a little bit more hammer and dolly and or slapper. You can see now we have to really push, just like we did on this side, to get the hood to deflect. It's not popping in and popping out.
Let me see if he's faking it, folks. I'm using my GIMP arm.
GIMP arm.
Yeah.
But you can spend as little and as much time at this metal finishing this as you want. You can sit there and pick up every little area that is low and dark until you have this perfectly metal finish. There's a very different thought between metal finishing and metal shaping. Metal finishing is just perfecting something that was already there versus making something from scratch, which is metal shaping. So we're just trying to fix weld seams, dents, damage, areas that are overstretched is the goal. So we took care of this golf ball area, but you can see we can spend more time in the adjoining areas around that to take care of that. And this, because this, I don't feel any physical damage. It just may take a couple of bumps with this dolly to just get it up where we want to be. I'm not stretching, I'm just bumping. The fact that we've taken that high point out, you're eliminating how much filler the whole car has. Because think about it, as your whole car as one shape, where your hood meets the cowl, if this is a high point, that is creating filler all the way to the end of the hood, into the cowl that's adjoining. If that's on the side of the car, that door that has a high point is going to cause the entire car to have an excessive amount of filler versus just fixing the one little area that we spent maybe 20 minutes going through and ironing out. It's being precision and understanding what you have and understanding what to do before you actually cause more of a headache where it takes off and then you have this massive area with lows. And it's even more critical on something like this Cadillac hood, because there is no inner structure that's going to hide your poor metalwork. So whatever you do to the hood and it's wavy here, you're going to see the same reflection on the bottom side when you open the car hood. And then you would have to cause a whole bunch of body filler on the bottom side to then end up with something that's thick. Maybe the hood's too heavy, maybe the hood hinges don't even open the hood anymore. So you're eliminating time, frustration, body filler across the whole car, and really pinpointing what the actual problem is. To recap, you need to diagnose, fix your shape, target your shrink, and quench and recheck. Oil canning is not your cue to grab a torch. It's your cue to use finesse. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you guys are interested in more in-person classes, go to sylvesterscustoms.com, or you can email me at travis@sylvesterscustoms.com. And we do have coaching programs available. Hope you guys liked it. We'll see you guys on the next video. One done.